Her mission was to heal a Navy SEAL. The miracle she gave his failing dog left him wordless. Some missions cannot be won with weapons. Some battles are fought not on foreign soil, but in the quiet desperation of a man watching his last connection to humanity slip away. This is the story of a warrior who came seeking peace for his dying partner, and found a feeler willing to fight impossible odds. But what he didn't know was that saving her would be the only way to save them both. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if you want to support the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. The Cascade Range in late October wore its approaching winter like a warning. Clouds the color of old bruises gathered against the mountain peaks, pressing down on the valley where Cascade Falls clung to existence. The town had seen better decades, back when timber meant something and tourists came for authenticity instead of luxury. Now it was 45 miles from anywhere that mattered, connected to civilization by a 2-lane highway that closed 6 times a year when the snow came hard. The air tasted of pine resin and coming storms, cold enough to sting the lungs, thin enough that flatlanders noticed the difference. The Ford F-150 that rolled down Main Street at precisely 1400 hours was clean but not new, dark gray, unremarkable except for the way it moved. Steady, purposeful. The kind of vehicle that suggested its driver understood machines were tools, not statements. It passed the boarded-up hardware store, a diner with 3 trucks outside, the real estate office with photographs of properties that would never sell at asking price. At the town's only stoplight, it paused despite the absence of cross-traffic, then continued toward the eastern edge where buildings gave way to forest and the road became gravel. Lieutenant Commander Jack Mercer had not chosen Cascade Falls for its charm. He had chosen it for its distance from everything that reminded him of who he had been. At 36, he carried his 6'2" frame with the economy of motion that marked men who had learned to move in places where excess energy meant death. His hands rested at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, but his eyes worked constantly, cataloging, assessing, measuring angles of approach and lines of retreat that his conscious mind no longer registered. 14 years of training did that. Made you see terrain instead of scenery. Made you count exits instead of admiring architecture. Made you incapable of sitting with your back to a door. The SEAL Trident tattoo on his left forearm was 3 months faded. The shrapnel scars across his ribs were 8 months healed. The prescription bottle in his glove compartment was 6 days untouched, because he had decided that numbness was worse than pain. His face held the kind of quiet that made strangers hesitate before approaching, a stillness that suggested dangerous capability held in check by choice rather than inability. But it was the German Shepherd in the passenger seat that explained why Jack Mercer had driven 9 hours to a town he had never heard of until 72 hours ago. Titan weighed 95 pounds, 10 less than he should have. His coat still held the shine of proper care. His eyes still carried the sharp intelligence that had kept them both alive across 4 deployments. But his rear legs trembled when he stood. The tremor was subtle, the kind of thing only someone who knew him would notice, but it was there. Constant, worsening, degenerative myelopathy, the veterinarian at the naval base had said. Progressive spinal cord disease, no cure. 6 to 12 months before paralysis. We recommend euthanasia before the suffering becomes acute. Jack had thanked the man, walked Titan to the truck, and started driving, because the veterinarian had been competent and compassionate and absolutely certain. And Jack Mercer had learned a long time ago that certainty was often another word for limited imagination. Titan was not a pet. He was a partner, a weapon, a brother. They had cleared buildings in Ramadi together, tracked insurgents through Afghan mountains together, survived an ambush in Syria that killed 3 men and should have killed them both. The dog had warning instincts that bordered on supernatural, nose capable of detecting explosives through concrete walls, jaws that could crush a man's forearm in 1 bite. But more than capability, there was trust. The kind of absolute certainty that when Jack said guard, Titan would die before letting anyone pass. The kind of bond that made the idea of putting him down feel like murder. The cabin Jack had rented was 7 miles outside town, set back from the road behind a wall of Douglas fir. Single story, wood frame, windows that could be covered, 1 road in and out. Defensible. The rental agent had called it rustic charm. Jack called it adequate. He carried their gear inside in 3 trips, moving with efficiency born from practice, while Titan explored the perimeter with faltering steps that made something in Jack's chest compress. That night, Jack sat on the porch with his back against the cabin wall, watching darkness consume the forest while Titan slept against his leg. The tremors continued even in sleep, small earthquakes through fur and muscle. Jack's hand rested on the dog's shoulders, feeling each involuntary spasm, counting them the way other men counted prayers. He had come to Cascade Falls because of a forum post. Some desperate midnight search about canine neurological conditions had led him to a thread about experimental treatments, and buried in the skeptical responses was a single comment that included a name and a town. Dr. Sarah Chen, Cascade Falls, Oregon, regenerative medicine specialist. Success with conditions others call terminal. The post was 8 months old. The username was deleted. But it was more hope than Jack had found anywhere else, so he had loaded Titan into the truck and pointed them northwest. Tomorrow he would find out if hope had an address, or if he had driven 9 hours to confirm what the naval veterinarian already knew. That some battles cannot be won. That some losses are inevitable. That sometimes the kindest thing a warrior can do for his brother is let him go. But tonight, with his dog's heartbeat steady against his palm, and the Cascade Mountains standing silent watch, Jack Mercer allowed Lowitt himself to believe that one more mission remained, one final extraction, not from enemy territory, but from the certainty of ending. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Titan's ears swiveled toward the sound without waking, and Jack sat in the cold, watching the stars emerge between clouds, waiting for morning to tell him whether his last brother could be saved. The Cascade Falls Veterinary Clinic occupied a converted farmhouse at the eastern edge of town, where Main Street surrendered to forest and the pavement cracked under the weight of too many harsh winters. The building wore its age honestly, white paint gone gray in patches, but the windows were clean and the small parking area was swept. A hand-painted sign swung gently in the morning breeze, and through the front window, Jack could see examination rooms that looked outdated but meticulously maintained. He sat in the truck for 3 minutes, watching, assessing. Old habit. Titan stood in the passenger seat, weight shifted forward to compensate for the weakness in his hindquarters, nose working the air that came through the cracked window. The dog's body language showed interest but not alarm. Good enough. The woman who answered the door was not what Jack expected. Dr. Sarah Chen was 42, but carried it in a way that suggested capability rather than age. 5'6", dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No jewelry except a simple wedding band on a chain around her neck. Her eyes were brown and direct, the kind that assessed without judgment. She wore scrubs printed with cartoon dogs and cats that seemed deliberately chosen to put nervous pet owners at ease. But her hands told a different story. They were surgeon's hands, precise and steady, marked with small scars that spoke of years managing frightened animals with sharp teeth. "You must be Jack Mercer," she said, voice calm and professional. "You called yesterday about Titan." Jack nodded. Words came slowly this morning, the way they always did when he had slept poorly and thought too much. Appointment was for 0800. "It's 8:03, she said with the faintest suggestion of a smile. "We'll forgive the delay. Bring him in." The examination room smelled of antiseptic and something herbal Jack could not identify. Sarah moved with quiet confidence, kneeling to Titan's level without hesitation, letting the dog investigate her scent before touching him. Smart. Respectful. Titan's tail gave a tentative wag, and Jack felt something unknot in his chest. The dog's instincts about people were rarely wrong. "Tell me what you've observed," Sarah said, hands beginning a careful examination of Titan's hindquarters. Jack recited the progression clinically. The tremors starting 4 months ago. The slight drag in the right rear paw. The difficulty standing after rest. The Navy veterinarian's diagnosis and prognosis. Sarah listened without interrupting, fingers probing muscle and bone with practiced gentleness while Titan stood patient and still. "He's magnificent," she said quietly. "You can see the training in how he moves, even compromised. Military working dog? Explosive detection. 4 deployments." Sarah's hands stilled for just a moment. "Then he saved lives. More than I can count." She completed the examination in silence, then guided Titan through a series of movements, watching with intensity that reminded Jack of spotters reading wind patterns. Finally, she straightened and met Jack's eyes with an expression he could not quite read. The diagnosis is correct. Degenerative myelopathy, progressive, ultimately fatal. She paused. But the timeline doesn't have to be what you were told. Jack felt his pulse elevate slightly. Explain. I've been working with stem cell therapy combined with electromagnetic nerve stimulation. It's experimental. The veterinary board considers it unproven. But I've had success with 12 dogs over the past 2 years. 7 complete remission. 3 significant improvement. 2 no change. She crossed her arms. It requires 6 weeks of treatment, 3 sessions per week. It's not cheap, and I can't guarantee results. What's the success rate for doing nothing? 0%. Then we proceed. Sarah studied him with those assessing eyes. You should know the cost. $15,000 for the full treatment protocol. Jack did not hesitate. When do we start? This afternoon, if you can return at 2. I need to run blood work and prepare the first culture. She knelt again, scratching behind Titan's ears with obvious affection. You're a good boy, aren't you? We're going to try very hard to help you. Titan's tail wagged stronger this time, and he leaned into her touch with the kind of trust he rarely offered strangers. Jack filed that observation away. Whatever else Dr. Sarah Chen might be, she was genuine. Jack and Titan spent the intervening hours exploring the town. Cascade Falls revealed itself slowly, a place forgotten by progress and suspicious of change. The diner served coffee that tasted burnt and eggs cooked by someone who had stopped caring years ago. The general store carried basics at inflated prices because the next option was 45 miles away. People nodded politely but did not engage, Naughton courtesy that respected privacy while maintaining distance. It was at the general store that Jack first saw her. The woman was perhaps 70, silver hair, carrying herself with the kind of dignity that poverty could not quite erase. She was attempting to purchase groceries, counting out bills and coins with hands that trembled slightly, when the store owner cleared his throat. Mrs. Patterson, I'm afraid your credit here is suspended until the outstanding balance is addressed. The woman's face flushed. George, I've been shopping here 30 years. The Social Security check comes in 4 days. I understand. But Mr. Vance bought this property last month, and the new management has policies about accounts receivable. Jack was turning away. Not his business, not his town, when Titan went rigid beside him. The dog's ears swiveled forward, body language shifting into the alert posture that meant threat detected. Jack's hand dropped automatically to Titan's shoulders, quieting him, while his eyes tracked what had triggered the response. 3 men entered the store, mid-30s, dressed in expensive outdoor wear that looked costume rather than functional. They moved with swagger that spoke of power unchallenged, spreading out to occupy space rather than navigate it. The one in front was tallest, over 6 feet, with a military haircut gone slightly long and eyes that suggested intelligence channeled toward cruelty. Mrs. Patterson, the tall one said, voice carrying false warmth. Mr. Vance asked me to check if you'd reconsidered his very generous offer for your property. The elderly woman straightened her spine. Tell Mr. Vance my answer remains no. That land has been in my family 4 generations. That's unfortunate. The man's smile did not reach his eyes. Because the county inspector will be visiting next week. Old houses like yours, all kinds of code violations, electrical, structural, could be condemned. Then you'd have to sell anyway, but for much less. Eminent domain is complicated. Jack's jaw tightened. Titan's growl was barely audible, a subsonic rumble only Jack could feel through his hand. The tactical part of Jack's brain cataloged details automatically. 3 hostels. Lead, approximately 6'2", 200 pounds, favoring left side slightly, possible old injury. 2 slankers, less trained, followers, not leaders. No visible weapons but bulges suggesting concealed carry. Threat level, moderate. Civilian environment, collateral concerns high. Assessment, disengage. Mrs. Patterson's voice shook, but held firm. I know my rights. You tell Marcus Vance he can take his threats and his money back to whatever hole he crawled from. The tall man's expression hardened. He stepped closer, violating her space deliberately. Careful, old woman. Accidents happen in these mountains. Houses catch fire. People get hurt. Jack's hand tightened on Titan's collar. Every instinct screamed to intervene, to step between threat and victim. To deliver the kind of lesson that made men reconsider their life choices. But the rational part of his mind, the part that kept him alive through 12 years of combat, counseled caution. Not his fight, not his town. He had come here for one reason, and it was sitting beside him with trembling rear legs and 6 weeks of treatment ahead. The confrontation ended with Mrs. Patterson leaving her groceries and walking out with tears in her eyes. The 3 men laughed, made a show of buying expensive items they did not need, and departed in a black SUV with Nevada plates. The store owner would not meet anyone's eyes. Jack paid for his supplies in silence and returned to the truck. Titan remained tense, watching the direction the SUV had gone, body language saying what Jack was thinking. Wrong. Predators. Threat. Stand down, Jack murmured. Not our fight. But as he drove back toward the clinic for Titan's first treatment, Jack could not shake the image of the elderly woman's dignity crumbling under casual cruelty. Could not forget the fear in her eyes that came from knowing no help would arrive. Could not ignore the instinct that had kept him alive across 4 combat zones, now screaming that he had just witnessed something that would escalate. At the clinic, Sarah greeted them with professional warmth, leading Titan back to the treatment area. Jack waited in the small lobby, surrounded by photographs of recovered animals and testimonials from grateful owners. The walls were covered with degrees and certifications, evidence of expertise earned through years of dedication. Everything about the space spoke of care applied with limited resources but unlimited commitment. Jack was studying a photograph of Sarah receiving some kind of award when Titan emerged from the back, moving easier already, or perhaps just responding to Jack's presence. Sarah followed, stripping off latex gloves, expression satisfied. He did beautifully, very calm for the injections. You can expect some soreness tonight, but it should pass by morning. She handed Jack an instruction sheet. Same time Thursday. Try to keep his activity moderate, but don't restrict him completely. His body needs to remember how to move correctly. Jack folded the paper precisely and pocketed it. Thank you. Sarah's expression shifted, becoming more personal, less clinical. He's lucky to have you. A lot of people would have given up. He's earned every chance. As Jack turned to leave, Sarah's voice stopped him. Mr. Mercer, if you see Mrs. Patterson around town, could you check on her? She's one of my clients. Brings her cat in. Sweet woman, but she's been under a lot of stress lately. Some developer is trying to force her out of her home. Jack's hands stilled on the door. The developer have a name? Marcus Vance. He owns half the town now, trying for the other half. Uses intimidation tactics on anyone who won't sell. Her voice carried anger carefully controlled. I'm next on his list, actually. My clinic sits on property he needs for some resort project. Jack turned slowly. He's threatened you? Not directly. But my landlord suddenly wants to triple my rent. The county is demanding expensive upgrades to stay licensed. My malpractice insurance mysteriously doubled. She smiled without humor. Vance is very good at making problems appear without leaving fingerprints. Outside, the afternoon sun disappeared behind clouds the color of gunmetal. Titan shifted his weight, ears swiveling toward sounds only he could hear. And Jack Mercer stood in a veterinary clinic in a town he did not know, looking at a woman whose only crime was refusing to surrender, feeling the familiar weight of decision settling on his shoulders. Not his fight. Not his town. He had come here for Titan, and Titan needed 6 weeks of treatment that could not be interrupted. But Sarah Chen was the only person who could save his dog. And if Marcus Vance destroyed her, Titan would die. Jack's voice came out flat, empty of inflection. These threats, how serious? Sarah met his eyes. Last week, someone slashed my tires. 2 days ago, the clinic's front window was broken. This morning, I found dead rats in my mailbox. She crossed her arms. I filed police reports. Sheriff Hutchins says he'll look into it. But everyone knows Hutchins is on Vance's payroll. Jack nodded slowly. Processing, calculating. You should be careful. I didn't leave my old life to run from the new one, Mr. Mercer. This clinic is all I have left that matters. Outside, an engine rumbled past. Jack's body responded before his mind registered the sound, turning toward the window, tracking the black SUV with Nevada plates as it rolled slowly past the clinic. The passenger window lowered, and the tall man from the general store looked directly at the building, his expression promising future attention. Titan's growl filled the small lobby, deep and sustained. Sarah's face went pale, and Jack Mercer felt the door he had been trying to keep closed swing open on hinges greased with 12 years of training that screamed one word through his entire nervous system: threat. The call came at 0300 hours. Jack woke instantly, no transition between sleep and full consciousness. Hand reaching for the phone beside his bed, while his eyes scanned the cabin's interior for threats. Titan was already on his feet, despite the awkward tremor in his rear legs, positioned between Jack and the door, ears forward and alert. The number was Sarah Chen's clinic. Jack answered without speaking, listening first. Her voice was controlled but tight with adrenaline. "Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry to call so late. There's a situation at Mrs. Patterson's house. She called me because she didn't know who else to trust. I'm heading there now, but I thought you should know. She said men are outside her property. She's terrified." Jack was already pulling on boots. Address: 42 Echo Ridge Road, about 3 miles east of town. "But maybe you should call. No authorities are coming." Jack's voice was flat with certainty. "How long ago did she call you?" 5 minutes. I'm leaving now." "Don't." The command came automatically. "Give me the address and stay at the clinic. Lock the doors." "Mr. Mercer, I can't just..." "Dr. Chen." Jack cut through her protest with the tone that made junior operators stop arguing. "If this is what you described, you arriving alone in the middle of the night makes you a second victim. Give me 10 minutes. Silence, then resignation. 42 Echo Ridge, the white farmhouse with the green shutters. But Jack, please be careful." He noted the shift to his first name, filed it away, and disconnected. Titan was already at the door, body language saying he understood the change from rest to mission. Jack pulled on a jacket, checked the Sig Sauer P226 he had told himself he would not need, and moved to the truck. The drive took 8 minutes on empty mountain roads. Jack killed the headlights a quarter-mile out and proceeded on parking lights alone, letting his night-adjusted vision read the terrain. The Patterson farmhouse appeared as a pale shape against dark forest, single-story. Probably built in the 1950s when people cared about craftsmanship. Lights blazed from every window, an old woman's defense against darkness and fear. 2 vehicles were parked on the road outside the property line. The black SUV from earlier and a pickup truck Jack did not recognize. 4 men visible, standing in a loose group near the driveway entrance, not bothering with stealth because they knew no help would come. Jack could see the glow of cigarettes. Hear laughter carried on the wind. He parked the truck 200 yards back, obscured by trees, and turned to Titan. The dog's eyes reflected ambient light, intelligent and focused. Jack's hand moved through a series of signals refined across 4 deployments. Quiet approach, stay close, alert on my command. Titan's posture shifted into working mode, the tremor in his legs seeming to diminish as training overrode physical limitation. They moved through the forest parallel to the road, Jack's steps silent on pine needles, Titan ghosting beside him like a shadow with teeth. At 50 yards, Jack stopped behind a massive Douglas fir and observed. The tactical assessment came automatically. 4 hostiles, same 3 from the general store plus 1 additional. All armed, pistols visible in waistbands. Overconfident, talking loudly, making no attempt at operational security. The tall leader was directing the others, gesturing toward the house. Jack's hearing, trained to catch whispered commands across windy Afghan ridgelines, picked up fragments. Last chance to sell. Old bitch needs to learn. Make it look like electrical. Fire spreads fast in these old places. The rage that flooded Jack's system was cold and controlled, refined by years of channeling emotion into precision. They were discussing arson. Discussing murdering an elderly woman in her sleep to facilitate a real estate transaction. This was not intimidation anymore. This was attempted murder. Titan sensed the change in Jack's body chemistry, the shift from observation to action. The dog's muscles coiled, ready, waiting for the command that would unleash 7 years of training designed to neutralize threats to national security. But Jack held position, watching, because training also meant patience. Understanding the full situation before committing to contact. One of the men walked toward the house carrying something. Jack's night vision identified it as a gas can. The man was unscrewing the cap, approaching the front porch, when the farmhouse door opened and Mrs. Patterson stood silhouetted in the doorway, shotgun held in shaking hands. "Get off my property." Her voice cracked with age and fear, but held steady enough. "I've called the sheriff." The tall leader laughed. "Mrs. Patterson, Sheriff Hutchins is at home sleeping. Even if he came, we're just concerned neighbors checking on an elderly resident. Now put that gun down before you hurt yourself." "I know how to use this weapon. My husband taught me. You have 10 seconds to leave." The man with the gas can set it down and drew his pistol with casual arrogance. "No. You have 10 seconds to put that antique down and sign the CI papers we left in your mailbox. Otherwise..." Things get unpleasant. Jack moved. He covered the 50 yards in 18 seconds, Titan matching his pace stride for stride. The approach was silent, angled to use the vehicles for cover, closing distance before any of them registered threat. Jack's hand dropped to Titan's shoulders, holding the attack command for 3 more seconds while positioning improved. Then he spoke, voice carrying the flat affect that combat veterans recognize as more dangerous than shouting. "Step away from the house." All 4 men spun toward the voice. Hands dropped to weapons. The tall leader's eyes widened slightly as he processed the figure that had appeared from darkness. 6'2". Moving with economy that suggested professional training, flanked by a German shepherd whose body language screamed military working dog. "Who the hell are you?" The leader's hand was on his pistol but had not drawn yet. Professional enough to recognize when dynamics had shifted. "Last person you want to meet at 3 in the morning, threatening an elderly woman." Jack's voice remained empty of emotion. "You have 1 chance to leave. Use it." The leader's expression hardened into false bravado. "This is private property business, not your concern. Walk away while you can." Jack's hand moved in a gesture too subtle for the men to notice, but that Titan read perfectly. Guard position. The dog moved 3 feet to Jack's right, creating crossfire angles, body lowered slightly into attack posture. "Mrs. Patterson," Jack called without taking his eyes from the threats. "Go inside, lock the door, call Dr. Chen and tell her you're safe." "Who are you?" The elderly woman's voice was steadier now. "Someone who doesn't like bullies." The leader made his decision, reading Jack's stillness as hesitation. His hand started to draw the pistol, mouth opening to give orders to his men, confidence built on years of victims who did not fight back. He had the weapon halfway clear of his waistband when Jack moved. 12 years of close-quarters combat training compressed into 2 seconds of controlled violence. Jack closed the 7-foot distance before the man's brain registered movement. Left hand trapping the gun arm, right hand delivering a palm strike to the solar plexus that emptied the leader's lungs and dropped him to his knees. The pistol clattered to gravel. "Guard," Jack said quietly. Titan launched. 95 pounds of trained aggression hit the second man center mass, jaws clamping on his right forearm with 600 pounds of pressure per square inch. The man screamed, pistol falling unfired as he went down under the dog's weight. Titan held the bite, not shaking, not tearing, but absolutely immovable, dark eyes locked on the target, with focus that made the man stop struggling instantly. The other 2 drew their weapons with shaking hands. Jack already had the leader's pistol, acquired during the takedown, aimed with single-hand stability that suggested extensive qualification. "Don't." The word carried absolute certainty. "Put them on the ground, slowly, 2 fingers, then step back." They complied, survival instinct overriding bravado. Jack kept the weapon trained center mass while his peripheral vision tracked Titan, still maintaining the arm bite. The man beneath him whimpering in pain and terror, but smart enough not to struggle. Jack's voice remained clinically calm. "Mrs. Patterson, please, call Dr. Chen now. Tell her to bring her phone and be ready to document what I'm about to show her." The leader gasped air back into his lungs, rage and humiliation twisting his features. "You have no idea what you just did. Marcus Vance owns this town. You're a dead man." Jack crouched beside him, weapon never wavering from the others, voice dropping to a register that made the leader's eyes widen with recognition. This was not civilian anger. This was something trained and cold and absolutely lethal, held in check by choice alone. I'm going to explain something once. I am a Navy SEAL with 12 years of combat experience across 3 theaters. The dog holding your friend has 4 deployments and 60 confirmed detections that saved hundreds of lives. We have eliminated threats in 18 countries. You are local thugs playing pretend soldier for a real estate developer. Jack's eyes held the man's gaze. You are so far out of your depth that you cannot see the surface anymore. He straightened, called Titan, release, heel, and watched the dog instantly disengage and return to his side, the bitten man cradling his arm and sobbing. Here's what happens next. You leave. You tell Marcus Vance that Mrs. Patterson is under protection. You tell him that Dr. Chen's clinic is under protection. You tell him that if one more person in this town is threatened, intimidated, or harmed, I will dismantle his entire operation brick by brick and deliver what's left to federal authorities. Jack's voice remained emotionless. Do you understand? The leader's jaw worked, pride warring with survival instinct. Vance has resources, lawyers, politicians. You can't touch him. Wrong. I have resources that make his look like toys. I have contacts in 3 federal agencies who owe me favors. I have documentation training from naval intelligence. And most importantly, I have nothing left to lose except the people I choose to protect. Jack tilted his head slightly. Test me, please. I would welcome the clarity. Headlights cut through the darkness. Sarah Chen's vehicle pulled up, and she emerged carrying her phone, camera already active. She documented everything with clinical precision. The weapons on the ground, the injured man's arm showing clear bite patterns consistent with self-defense against armed assault. The gas can sitting by the porch. Jack held position until all 4 men were in their vehicles and departing, capturing license plates and faces. Only then did he lower the weapon, clear it, and set it aside. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the house, shotgun lowered, tears streaming down weathered cheeks. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. I thought they were going to burn me alive. Sarah moved to comfort her while Jack performed a perimeter check, Titan at his side, both of them scanning for additional threats. The property was secure, for now. Inside Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, sitting at a table that had probably hosted 50 years of family meals. Jack accepted coffee he did not want while Sarah tended to the elderly woman's shock. The adrenaline was fading from his system, leaving the familiar hollow feeling that came after action. Who are you really? Sarah asked quietly, studying him with those assessing eyes. Someone who was trying to mind his own business. Well, you failed spectacularly. She smiled despite the circumstances. What you did was incredibly dangerous and probably saved her life. Jack shook his head. What I did was delay inevitable escalation. Vance now knows there's resistance. He'll either back off or come harder. Men like him don't accept losses well. So what do we do? The question hung in the pre-dawn darkness. Jack looked at Titan, resting on the floor but still alert, rear legs splayed to accommodate the tremor he could not control. 6 weeks of treatment. 6 weeks this town needed to stay intact. 6 weeks Sarah Chen needed to survive. Jack's voice was quiet but carried certainty that made both women straighten. We finish what they started. We document everything. We find evidence that holds up in federal court. And we make Marcus Vance regret he ever heard the name Cascade Falls. Outside, the first gray light of dawn touched the Cascade Peaks, and Jack Mercer, who had come to these mountains seeking only to save his dog, felt the familiar weight of mission settle onto his shoulders like an old coat, never quite forgotten. They picked the wrong person to terrorize. The cabin transformation began at first light. Jack moved through the space with methodical precision, years of operational planning compressed into 3 hours of focused activity. Furniture repositioned away from windows, sightlines cleared, the single approach road visible from 2 angles. Titan's bed relocated to the interior room with no external walls, the safest position if incoming fire became reality. Sarah arrived at 0900, carrying her medical equipment for Titan's second treatment and a laptop she set on the small kitchen table. Mrs. Patterson followed in her own vehicle, refusing to stay alone despite Jack's suggestion that fewer people in the cabin meant fewer targets. "I've been pushed around for 6 months," the elderly woman said, with steel in her voice that reminded Jack of his grandmother. "I'm done hiding." Jack did not argue. He understood the need to reclaim agency after victimization. Instead, he set her up with tasks that kept her productive but away from windows, then turned his attention to the real work. Sarah connected her laptop to her phone's hotspot and pulled up files. "I've been documenting Vance's activities for 8 months. Every property he's acquired, every person who sold under pressure, every suspicious incident." She rotated the screen toward Jack. "But documentation without somewhere to send it is just evidence waiting to be destroyed." Jack studied the spreadsheet with the same focus he applied to mission briefings. 37 properties acquired in 18 months. 12 owners who sold for less than market value. 5 suspicious fires ruled accidental by the local fire marshal. 3 elderly residents who moved to nursing homes within weeks of selling. The pattern was clear and damning, but Sarah was correct. Local authorities were compromised. This needed federal attention. "I have a contact," Jack said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Judge Patricia Morgan. She handles federal cases out of Portland. We served together when she was JAG and I was providing security for a diplomatic mission in Kabul. She owes me a favor." "What kind of favor?" "The kind where I carried her 3 miles through hostile territory after our convoy was ambushed." Jack's voice held no pride, just statement of fact. "She'll listen." The call took 4 minutes. Judge Morgan's voice carried warmth mixed with concern. When she recognized Jack's number. "Jack Mercer, I was wondering if I'd ever hear from you again. How's retirement treating you?" "Complicated. I need guidance on a situation. Possibly federal jurisdiction." The warmth shifted to professional attention. "Explain." Jack laid out the facts with military brevity. Real estate developer using systematic intimidation. Arson threats. Corrupted local law enforcement. Elderly victims. Armed confrontation the previous night. When he finished, Morgan was silent for 10 seconds. "You physically engaged 4 armed men?" "They were threatening to burn an elderly woman alive in her home." "Jack, you could be charged with assault." "They drew weapons first. I have video documentation from a witness. And the dog bite was defensive response to armed threat." Another pause. "Send me everything. Property records, documentation of threats, names. I'll forward it to the FBI field office in Portland." This sounds like it could be wire fraud, extortion under color of law, possibly RICO if there's an ongoing conspiracy. Her voice softened. "But Jack, if the locals are compromised and this developer has resources, you're exposed until federal agents arrive. That could be days or weeks." "Understood. How long until you can initiate contact?" "I'll make calls today. Expect FBI contact within 48 hours. But Jack, be careful. You're not in theater anymore. Rules of engagement are different." Jack disconnected and looked at Sarah. "We have 2 days to stay intact. After that, federal involvement should create enough pressure that direct action becomes too risky for Vance. And if he moves before then we're prepared." Jack's tone closed the subject. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Vance was receiving news that transformed his morning from routine to crisis. The office occupied the top floor of the only modern building in Cascade Falls, all glass and steel that clashed deliberately with the town's rustic aesthetic. Vance Holdings LLC announced itself in brushed aluminum letters, and behind the reception desk, the man himself sat reviewing quarterly projections when Brandon Krieg entered. Krieg was 41, 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle, going soft around the middle. Dishonorable discharge from the Marines 8 years prior for excessive force during a training exercise. He had found employment providing security for men who valued violence but wanted distance from its application. His face was bruised, ego more so. "We have a problem," Krieg said without preamble. Marcus Vance was 52, silver hair styled expensively, wearing a suit that cost more than most Cascade Falls residents earned in a month. He had built his fortune through a combination of legitimate business acumen and willingness to operate in legal gray areas where others hesitated. His eyes were blue and cold, the kind that assessed people as assets or obstacles with no middle ground. "Explain problem." Krieg recounted the previous night with growing discomfort. The intervention, the combat efficiency, the message. Vance listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, expression unchanging. This man. You're certain he's military? SEAL. He most like Tier 1 operator. The dog is working military animal, specialized. Lies training. Boss, this isn't some local hero playing protector. This is legitimate threat. Vance swiveled his chair toward the window, overlooking the town he was systematically acquiring. Name? Jack Mercer. Runs the rental cabin on Forest Service Road 12. Showed up 4 days ago. Dr. Chen's been treating his dog. Ah. Vance's expression showed understanding. So the good doctor found herself a champion. How romantic. And inconvenient. What do you want done? Vance considered the question with the same calculation he applied to hostile takeovers. Nothing overt. Not yet. This Mercer is temporary. He'll leave. They always do. Meanwhile, we adjust strategy. No more direct intimidation. We let legal mechanisms do the work. He turned back to Krieg. Contact the county inspector. Time to enforce every code violation on Chen's clinic. Talk to the state licensing board about her experimental treatments. Make sure the paperwork buries her. And find out everything about Jack Mercer. Service record, connections, vulnerabilities. He said he'd contact federal authorities. With what evidence? Concerned citizens checking on an elderly neighbor. We were never there, Brandon. The men you brought were never there. And if this SEAL pushes further, we have witnesses who'll testify he assaulted innocent people unprovoked. Vance smiled without warmth. I've been destroying opposition for 20 years. One jarhead with a hero complex won't change that. But as Krieg left, Vance felt the first uncomfortable whisper of concern. Men with nothing to lose were dangerous. Men with training and nothing to lose were catastrophic. Back at the cabin, Jack was conducting a different kind of planning. Sarah had finished Titan's treatment, the dog resting comfortably while medications worked through his system. Mrs. Patterson was compiling handwritten lists of every person Vance had pressured, every suspicious incident, creating human narrative to support the data. The sound of an approaching vehicle brought Titan to his feet despite the sedation, body going rigid, low growl building in his chest. Jack moved to the window, weapon within reach, tracking a small sedan navigating the rutted driveway. Expecting someone? His voice carried edge. Sarah looked out, expression shifting to recognition. That's Emma Reeves, local journalist. She's trustworthy. No one's trustworthy until proven. The woman who emerged from the sedan was 28, dressed practically in jeans and flannel, carrying a messenger bag instead of purse. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her eyes held the determined focus of someone pursuing truth through institutional resistance. She approached the cabin carefully, hands visible. Clearly aware she was entering tense situation, Jack met her on the porch, Titan at his side. State your business. Emma stopped at respectful distance, taking in the man and dog with journalist's assessment. I'm Emma Reeves, Cascade Falls Gazette. I heard about last night. I'd like to help. How did you hear? Small town. People talk. And I've been investigating Marcus Vance for 14 months. She met his eyes directly. My father owned property Vance wanted. Dad refused to sell. 3 weeks later, his truck went off Mountain Pass Road. Sheriff ruled it accident, but my father drove that road for 40 years without incident. Jack's expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted slightly. You're saying Vance killed your father? I'm saying my father died conveniently, and his property sold at probate for 30 cents on the dollar to Vance Holdings. Emma's voice held controlled anger. I've been documenting everything since. But local paper won't publish anything critical of Vance. He's our biggest advertiser. I've been sending stories to Portland outlets, but without hard evidence, no one will touch it. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Emma's legitimate, Jack. She's been trying to expose Vance for over a year. Jack studied the young woman for 5 seconds, reading body language, assessing threat level. Finally, he stepped aside. Come in. But everything you see and hear stays off record until I say otherwise. Agreed? Agreed. Inside, Emma added her research to Sarah's. 2 separate investigations, suddenly connected. Property transfers, financial records pulled from public databases, testimonials from victims too frightened to speak publicly. A pattern of systematic corruption emerged with clarity that would compel federal investigation. This is wire fraud, Emma said, pointing to electronic property transfers. He uses shell companies to hide ownership, transfers funds across state lines. That's federal jurisdiction. Jack nodded. Already in motion. FBI contact within 48 hours. What we need now is security until they arrive. Vance won't let this go, Emma said. He has too much invested. Half his portfolio depends on the resort development, and he needs Dr. Chen's property to break ground. You just became his biggest obstacle. Good. Jack's voice was flat. Let him worry. Worried people make mistakes. As if summoned by the statement, Jack's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Local area code. He answered without speaking, listening first. The voice was cultured, controlled, belonging to man accustomed to authority. Mr. Mercer, my name is Marcus Vance. I believe we have mutual acquaintances in Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Chen. I'd like to discuss our situation. Perhaps we can find reasonable solution. Jack put the phone on speaker, letting everyone hear. I don't negotiate with terrorists. A soft laugh. Dramatic. I'm simply a businessman who's had unfortunate misunderstanding with some overzealous employees. I've terminated their contracts. I'd like to make amends. Compensate Mrs. Patterson for her distress. Perhaps even invest in Dr. Chen's research. All I ask is that we put this unpleasantness behind us. By unpleasantness, you mean attempted arson and murder? I mean regrettable miscommunication that I'm prepared to address through appropriate legal and financial channels. Vance's voice remained smooth. You're a veteran, Mr. Mercer. You understand chain of command. Those men acted without my authorization. Surely we can resolve this like reasonable adults. Jack's eyes met Sarah's across the room. She shook her head firmly. Mrs. Patterson did the same. Emma was recording the conversation on her phone. Here's my counteroffer, Jack said. You cease all intimidation, return all property acquired through coercion at fair market value, and submit to federal investigation. Then maybe you avoid prison. Silence stretched for 3 seconds. When Vance spoke again, the cultured tone had acquired edge. You're protecting Dr. Chen because she's treating your dog. I understand loyalty, but that treatment requires 6 weeks. A lot can happen in 6 weeks. Clinics can lose licenses. Veterinarians can face malpractice suits. Experimental treatments can be deemed illegal. The threat was naked now. Walk away, Mr. Mercer. Take your dog somewhere else for treatment. Let Cascade Falls handle its own affairs. No. Then you're choosing very painful education about how the real world works. I've destroyed better men than you. I own this town. I own the authorities, and I have resources you cannot imagine. Vance's voice lowered. Last chance, walk away. Jack's response was delivered in the tone that made enemy combatants surrender without firing shots. Come at me. Come at them. Come at anyone under my protection. And I will burn your empire to ash and scatter what's left across every federal agency with jurisdiction. You wanted a war? You have one. He disconnected. The cabin was silent for 10 seconds. Finally, Sarah spoke, voice shaking slightly. He'll come, tonight or tomorrow. He can't back down now. Jack looked at Titan, resting peacefully despite the tension, weir legs twitching occasionally but responding to treatment. 4 more weeks. 4 more weeks to save his dog. 4 more weeks to protect the woman who could perform the miracle. His voice carried absolute certainty. Let him come. This is what I do. Outside, storm clouds gathered against the peaks, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in an hour. Weather was turning. The kind of storm that isolated mountain towns, cut communications, made federal help seem very far away. Inside the cabin, a Navy SEAL, a veterinarian, an elderly woman, and a journalist began preparing for siege. And 7 miles away in an expensive office, Marcus Vance made calls to men whose services came expensive and whose methods left no witnesses. The countdown had begun. The storm arrived with nightfall, temperature plummeting 15 degrees in 2 hours. Rain turned to sleet that clattered against the cabin's metal roof like small arms fire, each impact making Sarah flinch until she learned to distinguish weather from threat. Jack had sent Mrs. Patterson and Emma to town with instructions to stay in public places, witnesses providing security that isolation could not. The clinic was locked, documented, every piece of evidence uploaded to secure cloud storage with copies forwarded to Judge Morgan. Now it was just Jack, Sarah, and Titan in a cabin that had transformed from refuge to fortress. Sarah watched Jack work with something between fascination and concern. He moved through final preparations with efficiency that suggested this was routine rather than crisis. window coverings repositioned to allow outward observation while blocking incoming sightlines. Interior lights extinguished except for single lamp positioned to backlight potential entries. Vehicle parked facing the access road, keys in ignition. Go bag by the door containing essentials, medical supplies, documentation, and ammunition. You've done this before, Sarah said quietly. Different country, same principles. Jack checked Titan's water bowl, refreshed it, then returned to the window overlooking the approach road. Defending fixed position against numerically superior force means controlling access points and maintaining awareness. How many do you think he'll send? Depends on his resources and his desperation. Minimum 4, probably 6, possibly more. Jack's voice held no concern, just tactical assessment. But numbers mean less than training. If he sends local muscle, we have advantage. If he imports professionals, situation changes. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the cabin's warmth. I'm sorry, you came here to save Titan, and instead you're fighting my battle. Jack turned from the window, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Your battle is keeping Titan alive. This is just removing obstacles to that objective. That's a very clinical way of describing risking your life. Clinical keeps you functional. He returned his attention to the window. Fear is useful if it sharpens focus, paralytic if it doesn't. Choose which kind you're experiencing. Sarah straightened her spine, recognizing the challenge and rising to meet it. What do you need me to do? Stay in the interior room with Titan. If shooting starts, get on the floor behind the bed frame. It's solid oak, will stop most pistol rounds. Don't come out until I give all clear. Jack pulled his phone from his pocket, checked signal strength, frowned at the single bar. Storm's degrading cell service. If it goes down completely, we're isolated until it passes. How long? Weather service says 12 hours, but mountain storms are unpredictable. As if to emphasize the point, wind gusted hard enough to shake the cabin's frame, and the sleet intensified to hail that hammered like percussion. Visibility beyond 20 feet vanished into white chaos. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Perfect conditions for approach. Perfect cover for attack. Titan lifted his head from his bed, ears swiveling toward the door. His body went rigid, despite the sedatives in his system, and a low growl built in his chest. Jack was moving before Sarah registered the sound, weapon appearing in his hand as he shifted to position beside the window with sightline to the approach road. Contact? Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. Titan says yes. Jack's response was barely audible. Trust the dog. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, breath coming shallow and fast, despite efforts to control it. Then she saw them. Headlights. 2 vehicles, moving slowly up the access road, high beams cutting through the storm like searchlights. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin, just beyond where the cleared area met forest. Doors opened. Men emerged, 6 visible in the brief illumination before the vehicles went dark. Jack's voice remained clinically calm. Sarah, interior room, now. She moved without argument, calling Titan. In to follow. The dog hesitated, torn between training that said stay with Jack and command that said obey. Sarah's voice firmed. Titan, come, with me. The dog followed reluctantly, looking back toward Jack until Sarah closed the interior door. She positioned herself as instructed, behind the oak bed frame. Titan pressed against her side. His body was tense, trembling with more than neurological disease, every instinct screaming to protect his handler. It's okay, Sarah whispered. More to herself than the dog. Jack knows what he's doing. Outside, Jack watched the 6 figures spread into tactical formation, not random thugs. These men moved with coordination, hand signals, weapons held with familiar competence. Vance had imported professionals. The situation had just escalated significantly. Jack's tactical assessment updated automatically. 6 hostiles, armed with what appeared to be AR platform rifles and sidearms. Body armor, likely. Night vision possible, given the equipment visible. Assault formation suggesting military or law enforcement training. Objective unclear, but options limited to intimidation, capture, or elimination. Jack's advantages were fewer but significant. Defendable position. single approach requiring funnel through kill zone, intimate knowledge of terrain, element of surprise regarding his capabilities, and Titan, whose value as force multiplier would reveal itself when needed. His phone buzzed. Text message from unknown number. Last chance. Walk out unarmed. You leave unharmed. Stay inside and this ends badly. Jack typed response with thumb while maintaining weapon orientation with his right hand. You're on private property. Leave, or I defend this position with lethal force. The response came within seconds. We have legal authorization. Sheriff's warrant for your arrest. Assault charges from last night. Come out, or we extract you. Jack smiled without humor. Vance was establishing legal cover. Create narrative where Jack was criminal resisting arrest. Justify whatever force necessary. Clean operation. Defensible story. The man had done this before. Jack's thumbs moved across the screen. Sheriff Hutchins has no jurisdiction over federal property. This cabin sits on Forest Service land. You're trespassing on federal territory. I've contacted U.S. Marshals. They're en route. Technically true. Judge Morgan had federal connections. Whether actual marshals were coming was irrelevant. The threat might create pause. It didn't. Muzzle flash split the darkness. 3-round burst that shredded the cabin's front window and punched through the door. Suppressive fire. The remaining 5 figures moved forward in leapfrog pattern, 2 covering while 3 advanced, then switching. Professional infantry tactics. Jack dropped below the window line, rolled left. Came up at different position. He returned fire through the shattered window. 3 controlled shots aimed at muzzle flashes rather than targets. Not trying to hit, trying to disrupt timing and force them to cover. The advancing figures scattered, dropping behind vehicles and trees. Federal agent. Jack's voice carried command authority developed through years of ordering men in combat. Cease fire and retreat, or face federal charges. The lie was tactical. Create confusion. Make them question their intelligence. Introduce hesitation that could create mistakes. More gunfire answered. Sustained bursts that walked rounds across the cabin's front wall. Wood splintered, glass shattered. A round punched through the interior door, embedding in the wall 6 inches from where Sarah huddled with Titan. The dog's growl intensified to snarl. Jack keyed his phone, voice urgent. Judge Morgan, federal officer under fire, 32 degrees north. 121 degrees west. 6 armed hostiles, require immediate assistance. He hit send, knowing the message would timestamp and geolocate, creating federal record even if help couldn't arrive for hours. The attack pattern shifted. 2 figures broke from cover, sprinting toward the cabin's east side, attempting flanking maneuver. Jack tracked through the window, fired twice, saw 1 figure stumble and fall, hit or diving for cover, unclear. The second figure reached the cabin's wall, outside Jack's sightline from current position. Footsteps on the porch. Someone trying the door. Locked, but flimsy lock wouldn't hold against determined breach. Jack repositioned, weapon trained on the door, waiting. The door exploded inward. Boot strike combined with shoulder drive. Figure in tactical gear rushed through, rifle up, scanning for targets. Jack fired from prone position beside the couch, 2 rounds center mass. The figure went down hard, body armor stopping penetration but kinetic impact breaking ribs and collapsing lungs. Contact! The shout came from outside. Man down! Man down! Return fire intensified, dozens of rounds shredding the cabin's interior. Couch stuffing erupted. Kitchen cabinet doors disintegrated. The lamp exploded into darkness. Jack rolled behind the heavy oak table he'd repositioned earlier. Solid wood designed when craftsmanship meant protection. Now serving as shield. In the interior room, Sarah held Titan close, both of them shaking from adrenaline and terror. The dog's entire body vibrated with the need to attack, to defend, to serve the purpose he'd been trained for across 4 deployments. Sarah could feel him gathering himself, despite her restraining arms. No, she whispered fiercely. Stay. Jack needs you here, with me, keeping me safe. Titan's dark eyes met hers, conflict visible in their depths. Then his body shifted slightly, pressing closer against her rather than pulling toward the door, protecting her instead of fighting. The discipline was heartbreaking and magnificent. Outside, the assault force was regrouping, Jack heard shouted commands, tactical assessment of their casualty, discussion of alternatives. His ammunition was finite. Position was compromised. They knew his location now, could suppress while flanking. Time was against him. Then the game changed. New engine sound cut through storm noise. Heavier vehicle, moving fast. Searchlight swept across the clearing, illuminating the assault force like theater spotlight. Voice boomed through loudspeaker with authority that stopped all movement. Federal agents, drop weapons and get on the ground, now. The FBI had arrived 12 hours early. 2. Two vehicles, black SUVs with government plates, positioned to block retreat. 6 agents in tactical gear emerged, weapons trained on Vance's hired force with professional competence that made resistance futile. The assault team dropped their weapons, hands rising, professional instinct recognizing legitimate federal authority. Jack remained in position, weapon ready, until an agent approached the shattered cabin entrance with hands visible and badge held high. Jack Mercer? Special Agent Williams, FBI Portland Field Office. Judge Morgan sends her regards and suggested we expedite our response time. The agent's voice carried dry humor. She was quite insistent that you might need backup sooner than 48 hours. Jack lowered his weapon, safetied it, and stood from cover. Appreciate the timing. We were already 90 minutes out when your SOS hit, pushed it hard. Williams surveyed the damaged cabin and the casualties being secured. You've had an eventful evening. They claim to be serving warrant. There's no warrant. We checked with the county. This was attempted murder dressed as law enforcement. Everyone involved is facing federal charges. Williams gestured toward the vehicles. We'll need statements, but medical attention first. Anyone injured inside? Sarah emerged from the interior room, Titan at her side, both shaken but unhurt. The dog limped slightly, rear leg tremor pronounced from stress. But his eyes were clear and focused. Jack moved to them immediately, hands checking Sarah for injuries with clinical efficiency before dropping to assess Titan. We're okay, Sarah said, voice mostly steady, but the cabin is destroyed. Structures can be replaced. Jack's hand rested on Titan's shoulders, feeling the elevated heartbeat gradually slowing. You can't. Agent Williams directed his team through evidence collection while medics attended the wounded assault team member. Within 20 minutes, all 6 attackers were secured in vehicles, rights read, federal charges outlined. Williams approached Jack with tablet displaying preliminary reports. Marcus Vance, we've been building a case for 8 months. Wire fraud, extortion, conspiracy. Your documentation from Dr. Chen and Emma Reeves filled in gaps we couldn't bridge. Judge Morgan got us emergency warrants an hour ago. Williams smiled with professional satisfaction. We're hitting Vance's office, home, and business locations simultaneously. He'll be in federal custody by dawn. What about local authorities? Sheriff Hutchins? Already arrested. We have evidence he was on Vance's payroll, falsifying reports, intimidating witnesses. He's facing 20 years federal time. Sarah moved closer to Jack, exhaustion and relief making her unsteady. He caught her elbow, stabilizing her without conscious thought. It's over? Her voice held disbelief. The immediate threat is over, Williams confirmed. You'll need protection until trial, but that's months away. For now, you're safe. Jack looked at the destroyed cabin, at Sarah's exhausted face, at Titan struggling to maintain standing position despite neurological failure and stress. 4 more weeks of treatment. 4 more weeks this dog needed to survive. Dr. Chen's clinic. Jack said, It's secure? We have agents there now. It's protected. Williams studied Jack with the assessment of someone who recognized capability. You did good work here. Held position against superior numbers long enough for help to arrive. Textbook defense. Just protecting what needed protecting. As federal agents completed their work and the storm began to diminish, Sarah made a decision. You can't stay here. The cabin is uninhabitable. Come to my place, guest room. Privacy, and Titan needs stability for treatment to work. Jack started to refuse, default response to offers he hadn't earned, but Sarah cut him off. This isn't charity. You saved my life, my clinic, my town. The least I can do is provide secure location for your dog's recovery. Her eyes met his with determination that reminded him why he'd chosen to fight. Besides, monitoring Titan daily will improve treatment outcomes. It's medically sound. Jack looked at Titan, at the dog who had followed him through hell and deserved every chance at salvation. Looked at Sarah, the woman who refused to accept impossible and turned experimental science into hope. Made calculation that had nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with trust. 48 hours, he said, until I can arrange alternative. Sarah smiled, knowing he'd stay longer. 48 hours. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving Cascade Falls scrubbed clean under cold sunlight. Marcus Vance was in federal custody, his empire collapsing as evidence mounted. Sheriff Hutchins was detained. The assault team was facing decades in prison. And in a small house behind a veterinary clinic, a Navy SEAL and a German Shepherd slept for the first time in days without weapons within reach. The war was won. Now came the harder part. Learning to live with peace. The house behind the clinic was smaller than Jack expected, a 2-bedroom cottage that Sarah had converted into living space that felt more functional than decorative. Walls held veterinary certifications and photographs of recovered animals rather than personal memories. The furniture was comfortable but minimal. Everything suggested a woman who had rebuilt her life around purpose rather than comfort, filling emptiness with work because work demanded less than grief. Sarah showed Jack to the guest room with apologetic efficiency. It's not much. I use it mostly for storage, but the bed is good and there's privacy. She gestured toward the adjoining bathroom. Clean towels in the cabinet. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Jack set his go bag on the floor, surveying the space with automatic tactical assessment before catching himself. Not a safe house. Not a forward operating base. Just a room offered by someone showing kindness he hadn't earned. The realization was uncomfortable. This is more than adequate. Thank you. Titan had already claimed the area rug beside the bed, circling 3 times before settling with visible relief. The stress of the previous night had depleted reserves the disease had already diminished. His rear legs splayed awkwardly, tremor more pronounced than usual. But his eyes remained alert and fixed on Jack. Sarah knelt beside the dog, hands moving through practiced examination. He's exhausted but stable. The adrenaline surge probably accelerated some symptom progression, but nothing that adjustments to the treatment protocol can't address. She looked up at Jack. He was remarkable last night. The discipline it took to stay with me, instead of going to you during the fighting. He's been trained to follow commands even when instinct says otherwise. It's kept us both alive. Jack's voice carried something that might have been pride. But you gave him reason to stay. That matters more than training. Sarah stood, brushing dog hair from her scrubs. I need to check the clinic. Make sure the FBI didn't disturb anything critical. You should rest. You've been running on adrenaline for 36 hours. I'll rest when Titan does. She smiled with understanding that suggested experience with stubborn patience, human and animal alike. Of course you will. There's coffee in the kitchen when you want it. Fresh towels if you want a shower. And Jack? She paused at the door. Thank you. For everything. After she left, Jack sat on the floor beside Titan, hand resting on the dog's shoulders, feeling the rhythm of breathing and the involuntary muscle tremors that marked disease progression. 4 weeks remained in the treatment protocol. 4 weeks for experimental stem cells and electromagnetic stimulation to repair damage that conventional medicine called irreversible. The odds were uncertain. The science was unproven. But it was more hope than existed 3 days ago, and Jack had learned long ago that hope was weapon enough when wielded with discipline. He must have slept, because when awareness returned, sunlight had shifted angles and Titan was standing. Nose pressed against Jack's hand with gentle insistence that meant bathroom urgency. Jack stood stiffly, body cataloging impacts and strain from the previous night's action, and led the dog outside through the back door Sarah had shown him. The property behind the clinic was fenced, small but adequate for Titan's needs. The dog moved slowly, rear leg weakness obvious in daylight, but completed his business with dignity intact. Jack watched him with clinical assessment overlaying emotional attachment, noting gait abnormalities, muscle atrophy, coordination deficits, worse than a week ago. The confrontation had cost them ground. Sarah emerged from the clinic as they returned, carrying medical equipment. His morning treatment is ready when you bring him over. I've adjusted the stem cell concentration based on stress response data. She studied Jack with the same assessing gaze she applied to her patients. You look terrible. When did you last eat? Jack calculated. Yesterday, 1600 hours. That's unacceptable for someone recovering from combat engagement. She pointed toward the house. Kitchen. Now. I'll start Titan's treatment, then join you. We're both going to eat something that isn't adrenaline and coffee." The command in her voice was surprising and effective. Jack found himself obeying, entering the kitchen while Sarah led Titan toward the clinic's treatment area. The dog went willingly, having learned over multiple sessions that this woman meant relief rather than pain. Jack assembled food mechanically: eggs, toast, coffee strong enough to strip paint. He was halfway through the meal when Sarah returned, moving to the stove with comfortable efficiency and preparing her own breakfast while filling the silence with clinical updates. Treatment went well. His inflammatory markers are down 18% from last week. Nerve conduction response shows marginal improvement in the lumbar region. If this continues, we might see functional recovery sooner than projected. She carried her plate to the small table and sat across from him. Of course, last night's stress may have created setbacks we won't detect for days. But you think he has a chance? I think he has better than chance. The protocol is working, Jack. Not miraculously, not dramatically, but consistently. Incremental improvements compound over time. She met his eyes with directness that refused false hope. I can't promise full recovery, but I can promise that euthanasia isn't inevitable anymore. That's something. Jack absorbed the information, allowing himself a brief moment of relief before discipline reasserted control. How long have you been developing this treatment? Sarah's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. 3 years of research, 2 years of trials. My late husband was biomedical engineer. He designed the electromagnetic stimulation technology before he died. I've been completing his work. The wedding ring, around your neck. She touched the chain reflexively. 4 years this November. Car accident. Black ice on Mountain Pass Road. Her voice held steady through practiced control. He was brilliant, kind. You were going to start a family that spring. Jack understood loss that eliminated futures. I'm sorry. So am I. Sarah looked down at her coffee. After he died, I couldn't stay in Portland. Too many memories. Too many places we'd been together. I moved here, bought the clinic, threw myself into finishing his research because it was connection to him I could maintain. She smiled without humor. Then Vance started his intimidation campaign, and I discovered I'd just traded one kind of pain for another. But you didn't run. Where would I go? This clinic, this research, it's all I have left that matters. She straightened, deliberately shifting mood. Besides, running from Marcus Vance brought me a patient who fights armed mercenaries to protect people he just met. That's fairly remarkable return on investment. Jack almost smiled. Tactical necessity. They threatened the person treating my dog. You could have left, taken Titan somewhere else, found another veterinarian. There is no other veterinarian. You're the only one offering hope instead of euthanasia recommendation. Jack's voice carried truth he hadn't articulated before. And you needed protection whether I provided it or not. Wrong place, wrong time, right skills. You're a terrible liar, Jack Mercer. You stayed because you can't watch innocent people suffer without acting. It's who you are. The observation was uncomfortable because it was accurate. Jack deflected with tactical assessment. What happens now? With Vance in custody, his organization collapsed. Town needs leadership transition. Emma's writing the story. Real journalists from Portland are coming to cover it. FBI is offering witness protection to anyone who testifies. Sarah stood, carrying plates to the sink. Mrs. Patterson is organizing town meeting to establish legitimate local government. Things will stabilize. And you? I keep treating animals. Keep refining the protocol. Maybe publish research once I have enough successful cases to withstand peer review. She turned to face him. What about you? You came here for Titan's treatment. 4 more weeks of that. Then what? Jack had avoided that question with same discipline he applied to pain management. Focus on immediate mission. Ignore the future because futures had habit of being stripped away. But Sarah's direct gaze demanded honesty. I don't know. Terminal leave ends in 2 months. Discharge is medical, honorable, but permanent. Navy doesn't need broken operators with shrapnel scars and PTSD. He heard the bitterness in his voice, throttled it. I haven't planned beyond getting Titan through treatment. Maybe that's planning enough for now. Over the following days, routine established itself with surprising ease. Mornings began with Titan's treatment, Jack observing the protocols with interest that Sarah encouraged by explaining the science. Stem cells, harvested from adipose tissue, cultured in growth medium, reintroduced through targeted injection. Electromagnetic pulses, calibrated to stimulate nerve regeneration without causing cellular damage. Physical therapy exercises, designed to maintain muscle mass, while neural pathways rebuilt. It was fascinating and hopeful, and gave Jack something to focus on, beyond the silence that came when action ended and the mind was left alone with its damage. Afternoons. Jack knowed himself useful around the clinic and property. Repairs that Sarah's limited budget had deferred. Fence reinforcement, window replacement, security system installation that was probably excessive but made him feel functional. Sarah protested the work initially, then accepted it with grace when she realized Jack needed purpose as much as she needed the help. Evenings were quieter. They shared meals without elaboration, comfortable silence broken by conversation that ranged from tactical assessment of the FBI's case against Vance to debate about optimal nutrition for dogs undergoing regenerative therapy. Sarah was brilliant and passionate about her work in ways that reminded Jack why he'd joined the Navy. The desire to serve something larger than himself, to be useful, to matter. Emma visited regularly, updating them on the legal proceedings. Vance was facing 73 federal charges. Sheriff Hutchins had accepted plea deal in exchange for testimony. 3 of the assault team members were cooperating, providing evidence of systematic corruption spanning 5 years and 4 counties. The case was airtight. Mrs. Patterson stalked by with baked goods and gratitude that embarrassed Jack more than enemy fire ever had. She called him hero, protector, blessing. Jack deflected with monosyllables, uncomfortable with praise for doing what should have been done regardless. It was Titan's progress that gave Jack something approaching peace. Week 2 showed measurable improvement. The tremor in his rear legs decreased in frequency and intensity. His gait steadied. He could stand without visible effort. Sarah's excitement was professional, but genuine as she showed Jack the comparison data, graphs demonstrating nerve conduction improvement, muscle mass stabilization, inflammatory marker reduction. He's responding better than any previous case, Sarah said, reviewing results on her tablet. The combination of early intervention and his baseline physical conditioning is giving us optimal conditions for recovery. Jack watched Titan explore the backyard with something approaching his old confidence, moving with purpose instead of compensation. Will he fully recover? Defined fully. Sarah set down the tablet. Return to military working dog capability? Probably not. But functional nobility, pain-free existence, years of quality life? Absolutely. He's going to be okay, Jack. We saved him. The relief that flooded Jack's system was disproportionate and overwhelming. He'd maintained tactical control through firefights, extractions under fire, watching teammates die. But watching his dog slowly heal from disease that should have killed him broke something loose in his chest that he'd kept sealed since Syria. Sarah saw it, reached out, hand on his arm. It's okay. You can feel this. You earned it. Jack nodded, not trusting his voice, and stepped outside, where Titan immediately moved to his side. Man and dog stood in afternoon sunlight, connected by bond forged in combat and refined through crisis, neither one needing words to communicate what mattered. Inside, Sarah watched them through the window, seeing clearly what Jack could not yet admit. He'd come to Cascade Falls to save his dog, but somewhere between defending strangers and learning to trust again, he'd started saving himself. The final treatment session occurred on a Thursday morning in late November. 6 weeks to the day, from when Jack Mercer had first walked through the clinic doors, carrying hope, measured in desperation. A Cascade Range wore early winter like promise, snow dusting the peaks, air cold and clean enough to sting lungs accustomed to it. Jack stood in the treatment room, watching Sarah complete the last injection series with hands that had become familiar over weeks of observation. Titan stood calm and patient, no sedation required, trusting absolutely in the process that had returned function to failing limbs. The tremor that had defined his rear legs 6 weeks ago was gone. His stance was square and solid. When he moved, it was with coordination that suggested health rather than managed decline. Sarah withdrew the final needle, disposed of it properly, and ran her hands along Titan's spine with clinical assessment that Jack had learned to read. She was checking muscle tone, nerve response, structural alignment, searching for deficits that would indicate incomplete recovery or potential relapse. Finally, she straightened, meeting Jack's eyes with expression that held professional satisfaction and something more personal underneath. He's done. The protocol is complete, and the results exceed every projection I had. She pulled up comparison scans on her tablet showing Jack the before and after imaging. Spinal cord inflammation reduced 92%. Nerve conduction response within normal range for his age. Muscle mass actually increased from baseline, probably due to the physical therapy regimen. By every measurable standard, he's healthy. Jack felt something unclench in his chest that had been tight since the naval base veterinarian had delivered his death sentence 8 months ago. No relapse risk? Nothing's guaranteed in medicine. But degenerative myelopathy doesn't spontaneously return once neural pathways are regenerated. He'll need monitoring, annual checkups, continued good nutrition and exercise. But Jack, your dog is going to live. Years. Many years. Jack knelt beside Titan, hands moving over familiar fur and muscle, feeling the difference that data quantified, but that meant everything beyond numbers. His dog was whole. His brother had been pulled back from the edge. The impossible had occurred. Through science, stubbornness, and a woman who refused to accept that some losses were inevitable. Thank you. The words were inadequate, but all Jack had. You gave him back his life. Sarah's smile carried warmth that went beyond professional satisfaction. We gave him back his life. You brought him here. You protected the clinic so treatment could continue. You trusted me when conventional wisdom said there was no hope. She paused, something shifting in her expression. What will you do now? The question Jack had been avoiding for 6 weeks. Terminal leave ended in 3 weeks. Discharge was finalized. The Navy that had defined his adult life was releasing him into civilian world he no longer understood. He had saved money, had skills that translated poorly to normal employment, and had no plan beyond the mission that was now complete. Find somewhere quiet. Let Titan enjoy retirement. Figure out what veterans do when the war is over. Jack stood, deflecting with movement. You've done enough. More than enough. Answer, that's avoidance. Sarah's directness was gentle but firm. You have 3 weeks before you need to leave. Where will you go? Jack looked out the window at the town that had nearly killed him and that he'd saved in return. Cascade Falls was recovering with visible momentum. Mrs. Patterson had organized legitimate town council. Emma's reporting had attracted state attention to rural corruption. Properties Vance had stolen were being returned to original owners or their families. The town was healing, and Jack had been part of that healing in ways that mattered beyond tactical efficiency. I don't know, he admitted. I came here for Titan. That mission is complete. Staying longer is just delay. Or it's recognizing when you found something worth staying for. Sarah moved closer, close enough that Jack could see the precise assessment in her eyes. Cascade Falls needs people willing to stand up when others can't. We need a legitimate law enforcement presence while we rebuild. County is offering the deputy position, someone to maintain security until proper elections happen and trust is restored. Jack's tactical mind immediately cataloged the implications. Small-town law enforcement, community policing, authority without military structure. Serving people instead of national security interests. It was so far from his training that it seemed absurd. I'm not a cop. I'm an operator. You're someone who protects people. The job description is secondary to the instinct. Sarah's voice carried certainty. Emma talked to the county commissioners. They want you. Town council voted unanimously to recommend you. Even the FBI field office said you'd be excellent fit. They're asking this because I'm novelty. Navy SEAL saves town. Good optics. Jack heard the bitterness in his voice. When the novelty fades, I'm just damaged veteran with PTSD and chronic pain. Stop. Sarah's hand caught his arm, gripped firmer than he expected. Stop dismissing what you did. Stop reducing yourself to injuries and diagnosis. You saved lives, Jack. You gave people back their security and dignity. You proved that one person standing up makes difference. Her voice softened. And maybe in the process, you found something worth fighting for that isn't 9,000 miles away. Jack wanted to argue. to retreat behind tactical assessment and emotional distance. But discipline that usually served as armor felt hollow here. Because Sarah was right. Somewhere between defending strangers and watching his dog heal, he'd found something he thought he'd lost in Syria. Purpose, connection, reason to exist beyond completing missions and surviving consequences. 3 weeks, he said finally. I'll think about it for 3 weeks. Sarah smiled like she'd won important battle. That's all I'm asking. That evening, the town held gathering at the community center to celebrate what Emma's newspaper was calling the Cascade Falls liberation. Banners thanked the FBI. Tables groaned under contributed food. People who had been isolated by fear for months reconnected with relief and gratitude. Jack attended reluctantly, uncomfortable with attention, but understanding his presence mattered to people who needed to see their defender as real person rather than tactical asset. He stood near the back, Titan at his side, watching celebration with part of his awareness, while the rest maintained vigilance that never quite deactivated. Mrs. Patterson found him first, embracing him with grandmother's affection that made him stiffen before deliberately relaxing into it. You gave me my home back, my safety, my dignity. There aren't words sufficient, but thank you seems like place to start. Others followed. Elderly man whose property Vance had stolen. Young mother whose business had been destroyed by manufactured code violations. Teenager whose college fund had evaporated when his parents were forced to sell at depression prices. Each one carried story of loss and recovery, and each one credited Jack with making recovery possible. It was overwhelming and humbling, and made Jack understand why soldiers struggled with transition. Combat was simple. Clear objectives, defined enemies, measurable success. This was complicated. Gratitude he hadn't earned, impact he couldn't quantify, connections that demanded vulnerability he wasn't trained to offer. Sarah found him when the crowd became too much, reading his body language with practiced skill and guiding him outside to quieter space. They stood on the community center porch, watching early winter stars emerge between clouds, Titan resting between them. Too much? Sarah's voice held understanding without judgment. I'm better with clearly defined missions. Life rarely offers those. Usually it's just series of choices about what matters and who deserves protection. She looked at him with expression that made his breath catch. You're good at this, Jack. Caring about people. Defending those who can't defend themselves. Building instead of destroying. You just need to give yourself permission to be good at it. Jack met her eyes, seeing clearly what had been building for weeks, beneath tactical cooperation and professional interaction. Connection, trust. Something that felt dangerously close to foundation for future he'd stopped believing existed. I don't know how to be civilian. Don't know how to exist without mission structure and clear objectives. Then start with objectives you can measure. Keep Titan healthy. Help this town rebuild. Learn what makes you feel useful beyond combat efficiency. Sarah's hand found his, grip warm and certain. And maybe explore whether connections built under crisis can survive peace. Jack looked down at their joined hands, at Titan resting peacefully without tremor or pain, at the town through the window celebrating freedom they'd fought for together. Tactical assessment said staying was risk. Emotional investment created vulnerability. Permanence meant confronting damage he'd been outrunning. But standing here with Sarah's hand in his and his dog healthy at his side, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced since before Syria. Not just purpose, but belonging. Not just survival, but reason to want tomorrow. 3 weeks, he said again. Ask me again in 3 weeks. Sarah smiled. I will. Inside, Emma was organizing group photograph, calling for Jack to join. He started to refuse, then felt Sarah's hand squeeze his and saw Titan's tail wag. The dog's eyes held intelligence and encouragement, as if saying the war was over and it was okay to stand in the light. So Jack Mercer, Lieutenant Commander, Navy SEAL, veteran of conflicts across 3 theaters, allowed himself to be pulled into the photograph. He stood surrounded by people he'd protected, in town he'd saved, beside woman who'd saved his dog, and maybe started saving him. The camera flashed. The moment was captured. And for the first time in 8 months, when Jack thought about the future, he saw something beyond missions and endings. He saw possibility. Later that night, back at Sarah's house, Jack sat on the porch with Titan at his feet. The dog was stretched out comfortably, breathing even and relaxed, occasionally shifting position with coordination that 6 weeks ago had been impossible. recovery made manifest, hope proven tangible. Sarah emerged with 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to Jack before settling into the chair beside him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars and listening to night sounds of mountains at peace. 3 weeks goes fast. Sarah said eventually, "I know. County commissioners want answer before you leave. Deputy position needs filling. I know that too. And if you say no, I understand. You've done more than anyone had right to ask. You don't owe this town anything else." Jack sipped coffee, organizing thoughts with same precision he applied to mission planning. "I came here to save Titan. That was the only objective that mattered. Everything else was just obstacles to remove or threats to neutralize. But somewhere in removing obstacles, I stopped seeing them as obstacles, started seeing them as people who deserved protection, started caring about outcomes beyond mission completion." He looked at Sarah, letting her see uncertainty he usually concealed. "I don't know if I can be what this town needs. Don't know if I can transition from warrior to guardian. But I'm willing to try. If the offer still stands in 3 weeks, I'll accept." Sarah's smile carried warmth that made Jack's chest tighten. "The offer will stand, and you'll be exactly what this town needs. Because you already have been." Titan's tail thumped against the porch, the dog's approval clear even without words. And Jack Mercer, who had spent 12 years learning to be weapon, began the harder work of learning to be healer. 3 weeks would tell him if transformation was possible, but sitting here with his dog whole and a woman beside him who saw beyond damage to potential, Jack allowed himself to believe that some missions didn't end with extraction. Some missions evolved into purpose that lasted beyond the fight. 3 months later, spring was breaking winter's hold on the Cascade Range with reluctant grace. Snowmelt fed streams that had run silent since November, and the forest wore new growth like promise. Cascade Falls was unrecognizable from the town Jack had first encountered in October, not in geography but in spirit. Buildings that had displayed vacancy and defeat now showed fresh paint and open signs. People walked Main Street without looking over their shoulders. Fear had been replaced by something that looked remarkably like hope. Jack stood on the porch of the house he now rented on the edge of town, watching dawn paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Titan sat beside him, position square and solid, no trace of the tremor that had once defined him. The dog's attention was focused on the tree line, not with hypervigilance, but with simple interest in the world unfolding around them. A deputy badge on Jack's belt still felt foreign, weight and responsibility different from what he'd carried for 12 years. But 3 months into the position, he was learning that protecting people didn't always require weapons. Sometimes it meant mediating disputes between neighbors. Sometimes it meant helping stranded motorists. Sometimes it meant just being visible presence that said someone was paying attention. Sarah emerged from the house, carrying 2 travel mugs of coffee, handing one to Jack with a smile that had become familiar and precious. She'd stayed the night, something that happened more frequently now. Relationship evolving from professional cooperation to personal connection, with patience both of. F them needed. "County commissioners meeting at 10, she reminded him. "They want update on the security assessment." Jack nodded, mentally reviewing the report he'd compiled. Crime in Cascade Falls was minimal, mostly minor disputes and occasional DUI. The real work was rebuilding trust in law enforcement after Hutchins' corruption. Jack approached it like any mission: clear objectives and measurable outcomes. Community meetings, transparency, consistent presence without intimidation. It was working, slowly but visibly. "How's the clinic?" Jack asked, deflecting attention from himself. Sarah's expression brightened with enthusiasm that always accompanied discussion of her work. 3 new patients this week. Word is spreading about the regenerative therapy. I'm getting consultation requests from veterinarians in 4 states. She sipped her coffee. "I'm going to need to expand. Hire an assistant. Maybe convert the storage building into proper research facility." That's significant growth. It's terrifying and exciting in equal measure. She looked at him with expression that suggested the statement applied to more than her business. "I never expected any of this. The clinic succeeding, the town recovering, you staying." Jack met her eyes, seeing vulnerability that matched his own. "I never expected to want to stay. Spent my whole adult life moving toward next mission. Staying felt like stagnation. And now? Now I understand that sometimes the mission is building instead of destroying. protecting what's here instead of eliminating what's there. He paused, organizing thoughts that came easier now but still required deliberate effort. I'm not good at this yet. The civilian life, the relationships, the permanence. But I'm learning. Sarah's hand found his, fingers intertwining with familiarity that no longer triggered his retreat reflex. You're better at it than you think. The town loves you. Mrs. Patterson calls you her guardian angel. Emma says you're the best interview subject she's ever had because you actually listen. And she hesitated, then pushed forward with characteristic courage. I think you're remarkable, damaged and healing and choosing every day to stay and build something that matters. Jack squeezed her hand, response he was learning to offer when words felt inadequate. Titan's tail wagged, the dog's approval making Sarah laugh. Even Titan agrees, that's consensus. The radio on Jack's belt crackled. Dispatch with routine traffic stop inquiry. Jack responded with location and status. Professional competence, automated by 3 months of repetition. When he signed off, Sarah was watching him with assessment that had nothing to do with his job performance. You're settling in. I can see it. The tension you carried when you first arrived. It's diminishing. PTSD doesn't vanish. Chronic pain doesn't disappear. Jack's honesty was deliberate. But they're manageable here. Less triggering. The pace, the people, the work. It's different enough from military service that I'm not constantly reminded of what I lost. Maybe because you're discovering what you gained. Before Jack could respond, vehicle approached on the access road. Jack's body responded automatically, hand dropping toward weapon. Stance shifting into tactical assessment, before conscious thought identified the car as Emma's sedan. Old habits, probably permanent ones. Emma emerged carrying her camera and tablet, expression suggesting news rather than social call. Morning. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to catch you before the meeting. The trial date is set. Marcus Vance, Sheriff Hutchins, the whole conspiracy, 6 weeks from now in Portland Federal Court. Jack processed the information tactically. They'll want testimony from everyone involved. Prosecution subpoenaed you, Sarah, Mrs. Patterson, and about 40 other witnesses. It's going to be extensive. Emma's excitement was visible. This is going to be the biggest corruption trial in Oregon history. National media is already requesting press credentials. Sarah's expression tightened slightly. 6 weeks. That's fast. Federal prosecutors don't waste time when they have airtight cases. Vance's lawyers are already negotiating plea deals, but prosecution wants trial to expose the full scope. Make example that prevents future corruption. Emma looked at Jack. They're particularly interested in your testimony about the assault. Armed attack on federal witness, attempted murder, conspiracy. That's life sentence territory. Jack nodded, already planning logistics. Portland was 3 hours away. Court appearances would require multiple days. Someone would need to cover his deputy duties. But more concerning was what trial would mean for people who'd been victimized. Reliving trauma, public testimony, cross-examination designed to undermine credibility. How's Mrs. Patterson handling it? Jack asked. She's resilient. Says she wants to face Vance in court, make him hear what he did to her community. Emma smiled with admiration. She's organizing witness support, making sure everyone who testifies has transportation, accommodation, emotional backup. That woman is force of nature. She survived attempted murder and property theft. Court testimony is minor threat comparatively. Jack's respect was genuine. What do you need from me? Just be yourself. Tell the truth. Let the jury see what you did and why. Emma's expression turned more personal. And maybe prepare for national attention. Navy SEAL saves town from corruption is story every outlet will cover. Your anonymity is about to vanish. Jack's jaw tightened. Publicity was antithetical to operational security, to the privacy that made civilian transition manageable. But refusing testimony wasn't option. Justice required accountability, and accountability required witnesses willing to stand public. I'll deal with it. After Emma left, Jack and Sarah prepared for their respective days with practiced coordination. She headed to the clinic to prepare for morning appointments. He conducted patrol route through town, Titan riding passenger seat, both of them visible presence that reassured residents and deterred potential problems. Cascade Falls greeted him with waves and smiles that had replaced the suspicious distance of 3 months ago. Store owners called greetings. Children petted Titan with parents' permission and Jack's careful supervision. Elderly residents stopped him to chat about weather and town news, treating him as neighbor rather than authority figure. It was strange and uncomfortable, and increasingly normal. The county commissioners' meeting was routine. Budget discussions, equipment requisitions. Jack's security assessment confirmed what everyone could see. Cascade Falls was safer than it had been in 5 years. The commissioners approved funding for body cameras and updated communication equipment, investments in transparency that signaled commitment to legitimate governance. Afterward, Commissioner Williams pulled Jack aside. "The county is pleased with your work. More than pleased. We'd like to make the deputy position permanent. Benefits, pension, the full package. You've earned it." Jack absorbed the offer with mixture of gratitude and lingering uncertainty. Permanent meant commitment beyond temporary assignment, meant roots instead of mobility, meant accepting that this was life now, not holding pattern until next deployment. "Can I have time to consider?" "Take all the time you need, but Jack, you belong here. Everyone sees it, except maybe you." That evening, Jack returned to Sarah's house, their unofficial arrangement becoming increasingly official. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, classical music playing softly. Scene of domestic normalcy that would have seemed impossible 8 months ago. Titan settled in his preferred spot near the fireplace, groaning with contentment as he stretched out. A dog moved with easy coordination, no hesitation or compensation. Complete recovery. Miracle made manifest through science and stubbornness. Jack moved behind Sarah, hands settling on her waist, gesture that still felt new but increasingly natural. County offered permanent deputy position. Sarah turned in his arms, expression carefully neutral. "What did you say?" "That I needed time to think." "What's there to think about?" Her voice held gentle challenge. "You're good at the job, a town needs you, and unless I'm completely misreading this, you're happy here." Jack considered the statement with honesty that would have been impossible 3 months ago. Happy feels like strong word. Content maybe. Useful, connected. He paused, searching for precision. "Less broken, that's happiness, Jack. It just looks different than you expected." Sarah's hands came up to frame his face, forcing eye contact. "You came here to save Titan, you did that. But somewhere along the way, you saved a town, gave people back their security, and started healing yourself. That's not temporary, that's foundation. Foundations can be destroyed, I've seen it happen. So have I. Lost my husband, lost my future as I'd imagined it. Had to rebuild from nothing." Her voice was steady with earned wisdom. "But rebuilding taught me that foundations aren't about permanence. They're about choosing every day to stay and build. You've been choosing that for 3 months. The job offer is just making it official." Jack pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers, breathing in the moment's peace. "I'll accept the position." Sarah's smile was radiant. "Good. Because I was prepared to argue for another hour if necessary." "Unnecessary." "You're right. This is where I belong now." That night, Jack sat on the porch with Titan, Sarah inside reading veterinary journals, domesticity surrounding him like blanket he was finally learning to accept. His phone buzzed with message from Judge Morgan. "Heard you're testifying at the Vance trial. Proud of you for standing up. Even prouder you're staying in Cascade Falls. You've found your mission, Jack. Protect it." Jack typed response with careful deliberation. "Mission accepted. Thank you for everything." He looked at Titan, at the dog who'd survived disease that should have killed him, at the house that had become home, at the town visible through the trees, quiet and peaceful under spring stars. 8 months ago, he'd driven here carrying nothing but desperation and dying hope. Now he sat with health restored, purpose rediscovered, connection rebuilt. The transition from warrior to guardian was incomplete. Probably always would be. But he was learning that incomplete didn't mean unsuccessful. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons. Sometimes they were fought with patience, with presence, with choosing every day to stay when leaving was easier. Jack's hand rested on Titan's shoulders, feeling steady heartbeat, an absence of tremor. The miracle Sarah had given his dog had saved them both. given them second chance at life beyond combat and survival. 6 weeks from now, they would testify, would face down the man who'd terrorized this town, would stand publicly and declare that corruption lost and justice won. It would be uncomfortable and exhausting and absolutely necessary. But after the trial, they would return here. To this town, to this life, to the mission that mattered more than any Jack had completed in 12 years of service. Protecting what was worth protecting, building what deserved building, healing what could be healed. Sarah emerged from the house, settling into the chair beside him, her hand finding his with easy familiarity. Titan's tail thumped approval. And Jack Mercer, who had come seeking only to save his dog, allowed himself to believe what everyone else could already see. He was home. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and support the work we do bringing you these stories. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Jack's place? Would you have stayed and fought, or would you have walked away? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit the like button. May you find the courage to stand when others cannot. May you discover that healing comes through protecting what you love. And may you recognize that sometimes the greatest mission is not the one you planned, but the one that finds you when you're ready to be found. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for a hero. And when duty calls, when injustice demands response, when the innocent need protection, there are those who will answer. Not because it's easy, not because it's profitable, but because it's right. And that, more than any weapon or training, is what makes someone truly dangerous to those who would prey on the weak. God bless you all, and until the next story, stay strong.